tell you what I would like to see 5 years from now. This is a wonderful sport. And I'd like to see a sport where we're not fighting with each other over things, policies. I'm sure Tom will appreciate this. I spent 10 years of my life working as a senior aide in the U.S. Senate. And I never saw an industry come to Congress and ask for something that was divided. Usually an industry comes in and is together. It's unified. What this sport did is this sport took its disagreement over license into the halls of Congress. And for a prolonged period of time, it kept beating the drum, at least one side of it. How bad we are, how bad we are. So much so with the PR firms and the lobbyists and the whole thing. One day you pick up USA Today and on the front page is a giant syringe with a headline, I don't remember the exact headline, but the essence was, "Every horse running today is doped." We're talking about LASIX. There's one thing I remember from my days advising people who were running for office. Can perception become reality in the minds of people? Well, I've worked with some people who've advised presidents. As their career went in their direction, my career went in a different direction. And what I learned from them was repetition, repetition, repetition. Reach and repetition. You just keep repeating the same thing over and over and over and over again. And all of a sudden everybody believes it. And you demonize your opponent. So Tom's good, Jenny's bad. Vote for Tom. And in politics, that has had a terrible effect on us as a country in many respects. And now you can choose news channels and hear whatever you want to hear, and you never get the full story. I don't know, I'm a simple guy. The glass that's half full is either half full or half empty, but we all used to be able to agree there's something in that glass. So when the HISA bill passed, the RCI was not in favor of the federal legislation. We thought that there were better, simpler ways to achieve what the proponents were trying to achieve. But we were bad. Don't listen to them. So I remember calling up friends who were proponents of this bill and congratulating them on winning the race. Because where we sat, to have an industry that's not fighting with each other, tearing each other apart in public, in a competitive environment, where now with the advent of sports betting, we have to compete with every other sport because we don't have our monopoly as the only sport people in this country could largely bet on, unless of course you were in Las Vegas. Do we have challenges? Yeah. But we have to stop talking negatively about our sport. And it's amazing, you'd pick up, you'd go to any one of the online news sources and you'd see the comments from people who are heavily invested in the sport, talking down the sport that they're invested in. There was a point in my career, I was in charge of the economic development operation in New York, and one of the things was the I Love New York tourism campaign. Well, we had some high crime areas. We didn't run ads, come to this community because you might get mugged on your way going to dinner. No, we accentuated the positive. And there's a lot of positive in this sport. So hopefully 5 years from now, we're not fighting with each other or arguing. You know, we've got some practical issues right now with the transition to the implementation of a new federal law. They're going to all work themselves out as however they work themselves in the state. The challenge for us all is not to kill the baby. And that responsibility lies squarely on the HISA. And I know Lisa Lazarus is very well aware of that because we talked about this. Charlie Sheeler's aware of this. But that is a fear. It's a very legitimate fear for people who are wondering whether they're going to be able to make it. Not only in the newly expanded competitive market, but with the new regulatory structure that, you know, is obviously going to cost some money, as they all do. I hope 5 years from now, even though the existing regulatory structure, California, the Mid-Atlantic states, a number of other states have made significant progress in lowering the rate of catastrophic deaths of our horses. HISA will be judged by making progress even more so. And I pray to God they're successful. Because what's happened is there's more people paying attention to horses and horse racing. They're not horse fans, they just think everybody's mistreating their horses. And that is not the case. So I hope we have safe animals. And that's our collective moral responsibility, taking care of them when they're racing and when they're not racing. And I really would hope that perhaps the bumps in the road that the HISA folks have got to overcome, and some of them are going to be financial. You know, you can't add 2 new layers into the system, you know, a new regulatory layer and then an enforcement layer. You're not going to eliminate, you may reduce the state racing commission layer. But at the end of that, Charlie Sheeler has told us at the Jockey Club Roundtable it's going to cost a lot more money and we should be prepared for it. Well, there are segments of this industry that are barely making it, just getting by. And, you know, we're concerned that some of those venues may not make it the way they used to be able to make it. What amazed me, and maybe our leaders in Washington, D.C., here's what amazed me about the HISA bill. When I worked in Congress, and the senator I worked for was very good at this, there was always a must-piece pass of legislation. And if you had something you were trying to get through, it wasn't really moving or anything, we used to call those must-piece passes of legislation a Christmas tree. And then we would try to hang a Christmas ornament on it because we know it was must-pass, it had to go. And that's what happened with the leadership in both houses that passed the HISA bill. They hung that ornament on the COVID relief bills, $1.5 trillion. The thing that amazed me, and maybe this is ripe for a technical correction bill, might make it easier on everybody, including HISA. Congress is throwing around $1.5 trillion in the COVID relief bill. And you could read the money going all sorts of different directions for all sorts of different things. Some of it's got nothing to do with COVID. $1.5 trillion. And not a dime for horse racing. Not a dime. I've never seen anything like it in my life. It was a leadership bill. You mean you couldn't attach? I mean, they give $9 million a year to USADA to do like 13,000 drug tests. What are we doing, over 200,000 drug tests? Not a dime. I can't believe the majority, was he majority leader? He was majority leader of the U.S. Senate representing Kentucky. Not a dime. Shame on them all. You know, usually when the federal government wants the states to run a program the way the federal government would like to have you do it, whether it's the federal government or a designated entity like HISA, is a carrot. Hey, you do it our way, we'll give you 40%, or we'll give you 30%, or we'll defray your costs. And now, the budget bean counters that all of you in this room are running into, you go to them, not with a bill from HISA, you go to them with saying, hey, if we do it this way, they're going to give us 40% or 30%. Then all of a sudden, everything HISA's trying to do is easier. And then maybe we wouldn't be sitting here worrying about the small and mid-sized venues. So I don't know, that might be wishing for too much. But it would be nice. And so that's what I hope. That 5 years from now, everything that we're all collectively trying to do is working. It's not going to eliminate the challenges of some scurrilous person wanting to cheat or do something to a horse that they have no business doing to a horse. But there's a lot of people working in this industry at all levels. And the upper echelons of this industry cannot ignore the hardworking folks at the lower echelons of this industry. So it's a balance. It's a balance. And I would also hope that we don't go into a situation. Tom asked me about the NFL. I'm not going to say what that other guy said, but I am going to say the issue about transparency. Because I tried to figure out how many athletes the NFL, I went to look for their anti-doping reports, and you can't find anything online. You can't find number of tests. You can't find how many athletes were brought up on charges. You can't find the drugs detected, like you can find in horse racing, like you can find in the USADA annual report, like you can find in the World Anti-Doping Agency. There are league sports in the United States where that is all a big And I don't know what HISA's plans are for transparency of all that stuff. We'll see that as it comes out, but we've urged them to adhere to the tenets of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. May or may not apply to them, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. But the concept of transparency, especially on integrity programs, you don't want to run into a situation where somebody who's very well connected or a star is given a pass on something and nobody ever finds out. So, transparency is an important issue. So I would hope that as this plays out 5 years from now, we've got a really effective, really coordinated, really uniform, really successful HISA program that's transparent and the public can have confidence in it. But that guy we had on this morning told us stuff more about the NBA, that if I were betting on an NBA game, I would think twice. And the other last thing I want to leave you with is this. Horse racing is the thinking person's sport. Anybody can go sit in front of a slot machine and push the button. Bing, bing, bing. You don't have to think to do that. But in a country where our kids are weak in mathematics, the concept and a fun way to learn probability assessment and statistical analysis is to pick up a racing form and try to unpack the next contest. That's not gambling, that's education. But that's probably politically incorrect, and the chances of that ever happening is probably nil. But that's all this guy's got to say. But